All right, guys, welcome back to Crossman Productions. Um, I'm really excited about today's guest. You know, we bring in a lot of people and get to hear a lot of interesting stories. But the guest that I have today, he is familiar with a lot of the the older generation of actors and musicians, and the pioneers of Hollywood and of the music industry. And I like bringing in guys like this because it kind of it reminds us where we started in this industry. And I personally like hearing stories about some of the pioneers of television and music, because it also shows us how far we've gone in this industry. And then one of the things too I like about hearing things about like the Marx Brothers and like Frank Sinatra, people of that generation, is Hollywood was such a different place back then. People, Hollywood was just kind of starting out, and when you were in Hollywood, it meant something. So it's a little bit different atmosphere than it is now. So I love hearing those stories. So my guest is Steve Stoliar. He's going to come on and he's going to share his journey. And he has some really interesting stories that I'm really eager to hear. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Steve. Steve, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing, Parks?
I'm doing awesome. I really,
I
when I
wouldn't go
talk
that
to
far. I'm
I'm
not
sorry.
going to say I'm awesome, but I'm fine. And I'm not going to say I'm amazing, but I'll say I'm fine, because those words are overused. But fine isn't bad unless you're grading coins, in which case it's only in the middle. But I digress. How do I digress? And I'm not even talking yet. But please continue saying nice things about me.
No, I'm excited about having you in. When I talked to Steve, and Steve introduced us this week on the phone, and I heard some of the stories that you were telling. I was like, this is gonna be an interesting interview. So,
With any luck.
well, thank you, first of all, for being on the show. I'm really excited
Sure.
about having you.
Happy to be here.
Cool. So, we'll go ahead and kick this off. So, kind of introduce yourself to the audience, and kind of tell where you were born and raised, and what was life like for Steve growing up.
Well, in order to not have people switch this off immediately, I might as well jump ahead in terms of introducing myself
Okay.
and say that the landmark event that changed my life was getting to work for my idol and hero, Groucho Marx, in the last years of his life. And all I ever wanted to do was just shake his hand and thank him for all the laughs. And
Right.
through an extraordinary set of circumstances, I not only got to do that, but work in his house for the last 3 years of his life. And I wrote a book about it called Raised Eyebrows, My Years Inside Groucho's House, which is
Right.
currently being developed into a motion picture. So that is why I'm on the show. But
Right.
if you want to know about my background, I was born in St. Louis and the youngest of three children, and was fascinated early on with old movies, watching silent movies on TV. To me, they were just, quote, old time movies,
Right.
Chaplin and the Keystone Cops and that sort of thing. I also have very vague recollections of the Nairobi Trio on the Ernie Kovacs show as early influences on my TV viewing and my understanding of comedy. Also, Mad Magazine figured prominently into it. And then our family moved to California in 1962 when I was almost 8, but I still have some very happy memories of St. Louis. Lightning bugs. I miss lightning bugs. And I miss playing in the snow because I didn't have to shovel it or drive in it or worry about skidding into a tree because I was just a kid. And my mom would dress me up in layers of clothing and the mittens that clip to your cuffs so you don't lose them.
Right.
And so I have fond childhood memories. But it was always made clear to me that celebrities were different from normal people. Both my parents loved old movies, which of course weren't old when they first saw them. Right. I also put out a book of my father's wartime letters to my mother from Europe while he was fighting the Nazis. The original ones, not the knockoffs that we're stuck with today. And and even in the midst of World War II, he's reviewing the movies that they're seeing in camp in France and Germany and Italy, and he's giving little thumbnail because he knew my mom would want to know what he thought of them, and then she would write him about, have you seen Meet Me in St. Louis yet? No, but da da da. Anyway. Celebrities were different creatures. And after we moved out here, when we'd be driving around, my mom would see someone and say, is that somebody? Obviously, everyone is somebody.
Right.
And not even a reference to Dean Martin's theme song. But she meant, are they someone that we've seen on TV or in the movies, which would get her excited. And I remember she would come home from shopping and say, I saw Simon Oakland at Gelson's Supermarket. I mean, he was in West Side Story and Psycho and one of those character actors. But it was a big deal to us to see someone in person. And in fact, on the flight from St. Louis to LA, now, I had seen I Love Lucy's and the Lucy Desi comedy hours, where wherever Lucy went, she would run into a celebrity, William Holden and Harpo Marx and John Wayne. Anyway, so I thought that Hollywood people just would bump into celebrities wherever they were. Well, as it turns out, on the plane from St. Louis to LA, sitting directly in front of us was Red Skelton, who was at the height of his television popularity. And a few rows ahead of him was Andy Griffith. Again, the Andy Griffith Show was white hot at the time. And I thought, it really is like I Love Lucy. We haven't even landed yet, and here are these two stars. And Skelton was wonderful. My older sister, Carol, had been crying because her boyfriend didn't make it to the airport to say goodbye to her. So Skelton gave her his handkerchief to soothe her. And then my middle sister, Patty, was interested in art, and Skelton drew a little pencil sketch of the front of the menu. This tells you how far back it was that the flight had a menu with a little still life of like grapes and a wine glass and food. And so he drew that. And then to entertain me, he had one of those little pop guns, the kind where they're wooden and you push the back and a cork on a string comes out the front. He had that tucked into his suit jacket. And every now and again, he would turn around and shoot me with the cork and then put it back in. Now, of course, he would be wrestled to the ground by security forces now if you tried to board a plane, even with a pop gun. But in 1962, and being Red Skelton. So on the flight all the way from St. Louis to Los Angeles, Red Skelton kept the Stoliar children entertained, bless his heart. And then I grew up, assuming I have grown up, in the San Fernando Valley in Tarzana, which people don't believe was named after Tarzan because Edgar Rice Burroughs, who wrote the books, had a ranch there, and he had the freedom to name it whatever he wanted because there was no one else here at the time. So I grew up in Tarzana. Our next door neighbor was Marilyn Beck, who was a syndicated entertainment columnist. And she would have parties with celebrities. I didn't get to go, but my sister got to go to a couple. But again, it was like celebrity adjacent.
Wow.
It's like it was jazzy to think about sort of being close to that. I had always had a fascination with history and archaeology and paleontology, fossils and Roman coins and ancient history. So that was a real passion of mine. And my intention, I initially thought I might be an archaeologist. And then as it got time to go to college, I became a history major thinking, I don't know, that I would teach history or write a book about history, something like that. But that was a big preoccupation of mine, while at the same time developing a real passion for classic films and classic comedies, especially the Marx Brothers, which I really, I had seen fragments of their movies as a kid. And I had an Uncle Joe on my mother's side who was a balding man with glasses, a mustache, and smoked a cigar and wiggled his eyebrows and said funny things. So when I discovered Groucho Marx, I thought, geez, just like Uncle Joe. But high school was when my passion really took off. And I thought, where have these guys been hiding? And I would, this is before VCRs and TCM and all that sort of thing. So I would just get each week's TV guide and look through it ahead of time and circle when old movies were going to be on, and just sort of will myself to stay awake past Carson, past the Tomorrow show, into the netherworld of local car commercials. And then I'd cross these movies off my list. And there was also a record that came out that had excerpts from the Marx Brothers Paramount films. And my friends and I would just listen to it until, the groove was smooth, to learn the routines, because you couldn't just, pop a DVD and freeze it.
Right.
So I had these twin passions, which was like archaeology and then comedy. I was class clown in our Taft High School senior class of 1,100 people, which didn't mean that I was a goof off. It meant that I could be depended upon to tell jokes and make sarcastic and clever remarks, some of which my teachers appreciated, others did not.
Right.
But that I got a taste of what it was like to entertain at the senior breakfast, doing impressions and parodies of commercials at the time and things like that. But I didn't take seriously that there was any kind of path for me, either as a writer or an actor. That it was fun to be into that. But in terms of like my college plans, it was history, as if being a history major was any kind of shortcut to fabulous riches, But I don't tend to think too far ahead. My obsession with Groucho grew towards the end of high school and beginning of college. I got to see his one-man show at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in late '72. And even from the back of the pavilion, I think the tickets were $9.50, which wouldn't pay for parking now. But that was like the top ticket price, but I had no ins for good seats, so they weren't great seats for my roommate and I. And I was struck by how old and frail he was, because the press had kept up the idea that good old Groucho at 80, 82 years old, just as sharp and funny as ever. And this old man shuffled out and said, "I'd like to take a bow for Harpo and for Chico." And I thought, oh my God, he's old. Um, but then I realized there was still a lot of him left. And when I applauded, my hands stung the next morning because I clapped so hard, because I wanted the vibrations from my hands to reach his ears, because I knew for a fact that that was as close as I would ever get to Groucho. And as an interesting consolation, interesting to me anyway, in the parking lot afterwards, when I was going down to get my car, I spotted Zeppo Marx, who was the fourth Marx brother who was in their stage days and in the first 5 films they made at Paramount. And I knew what he looked like because my obsession with the Marx brothers, I was up on whatever articles and photographs there were. And he was with a years younger blonde and was trying to find his car and not succeeding. And I thought, well, I'm never going to meet Groucho, but damn it, I'm going to meet a Marx brother right now. And I went over and I just said, "Excuse me, Mr. Marx, I just wanted to let you know how much I enjoyed you in your movies." And he said, "You didn't enjoy me, you were enjoying my brothers." And I thought, gee, I'm glad I got up the courage to go over and compliment this man. So I was sort of treated brusquely by Zepp. And then what happened was there was a movie the Marx Brothers made called Animal Crackers. They made it in 1930 at Paramount, and based on their Broadway show of the same name. And in the late 50s, MCA Universal bought the package of old Paramount films, pre-1949 Paramount films, and they would syndicate them in television packages. And you would see this shield that said MCA TV release. And it used to bug me that it said MCA instead of an MCA. But anyway, be that as it may, Animal Crackers was not included in the package of Marx Brothers films they syndicated because basically due to a clerical error, the copyright had expired and reverted back to the authors of the play and the composers of the music. So Universal got Animal Crackers as part of Paramount's old films, but they didn't have the right to do anything with it. And for sure, they didn't think it was worth spending a nickel to clear the rights to an old black and white Marx Brothers movie based on a stage play. Well, my friends and I were all Marx Brothers fans, and we thought this is a priority. I mean, how can they, in these days when you get the DVD and it's got bonus footage of behind the scenes and unreleased featurettes on the making of the film and things like that, you think, how could they, the Marx Brothers only made a dozen or so movies. It isn't like they cranked them out over decades. And this one was their second film. It's the one where Groucho plays Captain Spaulding. His theme song, Hooray for Captain Spaulding, came from it. And, I Shot an Elephant in My Pajamas came. So it was a famous, good movie, but we couldn't, it had never been re-released in decades and hadn't been part of their syndication package, so it hadn't really been on television, and it was this like great lost film. And I started a petition drive and a committee when I was at UCLA, and we had a table on Bruin Walk, which is the big ramp that students walk up to get to class. And along Bruin Walk, there would be tables for End the Vietnam War, legalize marijuana, rights for gays, and then our table to get Animal Crackers re-released. And I managed to get in touch with a woman named Erin Fleming, who was she had started as Groucho's secretary, and she ended up as his manager, and also really, as he got older and more dependent, she really was calling the shots in his life personally and professionally. So she was like guarding the golden fleece. And
Right.
she agreed to bring Groucho to UCLA so that we could talk to the news people about our campaign. And this, of course, was the culminate. It's like, well, after I do this, I can die because I will have. And I said, Groucho, I am very happy to be meeting you after all this time. And he said, well, you should be. And Aaron said, this is Steve. He's the one trying to get Animal Crackers re-released. And Groucho said, well, so did you get it? And I said, not yet, but we're working on it. And he said, you better or I'll fire you. And I said, I didn't realize I was working for you. How much are you paying me? And he said, a little less than nothing. And it's like I'm sort of having an out-of-body experience, looking at me sitting next to him, conversing as if we're pals, and my heart is trying not to jump out of my shirt.
Right.
I remember one of the news people saying, Mr. Marks, what is the purpose of your appearance here today? And he said, I expect to get lunch. And she said, no, but I mean, besides that, I may get dinner. And someone else said, what do you think of how the younger generation has embraced the Marx Brothers and their films? And Groucho said, well, I'm flattered by it. Last Halloween, 3 kids showed up at my door dressed as Hoppo, Chico, and Groucho. And I said, what did you give them? And he said, I sent for the police. So, I mean, it was just this, and I came to realize that despite my disappointment at the one-man show about his condition, there was still a lot of the classic Groucho left in him that would take a straight line and twist it and hand it back to you. So Universal, I guess, embarrassed by all of our talking about how terrible they were, that they didn't care enough to bring this out, they cleared the rights, they struck new prints, and they decided they'd open it in 2 places, in Westwood near UCLA and in New York. And then that would be it, and they would be done with it, and they didn't want to hear any more about this stupid old movie. So I got to go to the re-premiere in Westwood, and that was a real gratifying moment. And it ended up breaking the house record at the UA Westwood that had been set by the French Connection several years earlier. So we sort of showed Universal that it wasn't just my friends and me waiting to see this movie. And it was really gratifying in the following weeks to see long lines of kids in tennis shoes and T-shirts and blue jeans waiting to pay money to see this 1930 black and white movie. And that summer, which was 74, I had a couple of summer jobs that fell through, for which I remain eternally grateful. Because with my back against the wall and my dad saying, I don't want you sitting on your fanny all summer. I want you to go out, see if Taco Bell needs someone, see if they need busboys. And I thought, I don't want to go to Taco Bell. I don't want to be a bus. And I thought, well, I have nothing to lose. So I called Aaron Fleming and I said, is there anything at all that you think I might possibly be able sometime to? And she said, well, actually, it's funny that you called, because I used to be Groucho's secretary, but now I'm his manager. And there's such a ton of fan mail to deal with because of all the renewed interest in the Marx Brothers. And we need someone who really knows his Marx Brothers to organize all of Groucho's memorabilia to be donated later to the Smithsonian. And I'm thinking, oh God, please, 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 please. And in fact, I was hired to work inside Groucho's house.
Wow.
To make my own hours, to come and go as I wanted. And they paid me money to immerse myself. I mean, it was just, my mom used to have fantasies of taking a bath in chocolate sauce. That to her was like the ultimate guilty pleasure. Well, I was ankle deep in Marx Brothers memorabilia, letters and posters and photos of family photos of the brothers out of makeup and all this stuff. And being able to spend quality time with my hero. At the lunch table, I was always welcome. It wasn't like, no, the help eats in the kitchen. It was like, you are welcome here. So whether Steve Allen or Jack Lemmon or George Burns or one of Groucho's old writers was coming over, I was free to sit there and listen and even contribute if I felt like it. And ended up working for him the last 3 years of his life. And it changed mine. I find there was such a strong gravitational pull towards Groucho and his circle. He was always more comfortable in the company of writers than of actors. Now, comedians had intelligence and sense of humor to begin with, so he liked his fellow Burns and Benny and those people. But even in the 30s and 40s at MGM, he didn't care about sitting at the same table as Clark Gable and Greta Garbo and Joan Crawford. He wanted to sit at the writers' table because they were interesting and talked about current events and made clever remarks and talked about politics and personal relationships. And that's what stimulated Groucho. So I was really drawn to that whole atmosphere, and I ended up changing my major from history to motion picture television.
Wow.
And graduated with a degree in that, which did not entitle me to anything. It didn't entitle me to a discount at the UA Westwood, but that was my seismic shift. So that's my answer to your first question.
So, that's really interesting. What was it like, the moment that you got to go to his house and
It
be
was
able
like-
to watch?
It was like Dorothy entering Munchkin Land and shifting from sepia to Technicolor. It's like the big black door with a brass doorknob, round brass doorknob, opened up, and inside it was like, oh my God, I'm in the lion's den. I'm in, and it's like here, I recognized some of the rooms and furniture from photos I'd seen in books and articles. And it was just, I just, got black and blue from pinching myself because it was, the phrase dream come true is overused, just like amazing and awesome. And mine was a literal dream come true because I used to dream about meeting Groucho, and they were so vivid. I remember in the dreams, I would think, this isn't a dream. This is really happening. He's right there. And then as it would start to dissolve and I would start to wake up, I think, damn it, shit. It wasn't real. It was a dream. And I reminded myself that given the fact that he was in his 80s and increasingly frail, I just was never going to meet him. And I was very happy to be wrong about that.
Right.
And in terms of Zeppo, who was such a gracious receiver of my compliment in the garage of the Dorothy Chandler 2 years earlier, he and I ended up dating the same girl.
Oh, wow.
She was 19, I was 20, and he was 74.
Wow.
I had brought her to Groucho's for dinner one night when Zeppo was coming up from Palm Springs, where he was living. And he was sort of a rascal. He had an eye for the ladies, not dissimilar from his late brother Chico. And he had recently been divorced by his wife Barbara, who threw him over for Frank Sinatra. So he was single again, and that explains the young blonde that was with him at the Dorothy Chandler. And my girlfriend was young and blonde and blue-eyed and very intelligent. And he sort of was taken by her. And then a few months later, she and I went our separate ways. And I had found a couple of original photographs of Zeppo and Groucho that I wanted them to sign. So I sent them to Zeppo with a cover letter saying, Linda and I aren't together anymore. If you have any advice for the lovelorn, I know you've been around the block or time or two. I get a call. Steve, it's Zeppo Mox. Am I catching you at a... No. Listen, I got your letter and got the photos. I'll be happy to sign them. God, I was good looking back then. Anyway, this is a little awkward, and you must tell me if I step on your toes, because I would never want to do that, you understand. But do you think that Linda would go out with me? And I thought, this is beyond weird. I'm asking for advice for the lovelorn, and he wants to hit on her.
Wow.
And I said, I don't know. She liked you, and let me, because listen, if this is at all, no, it's fair. I said, let me ask her. And okay, so I called her up, and she also thought it was strange, but thought, it's an experience. How many people can say they were taken out on a date by one of the Marx Brothers? So again, out of curiosity, she agreed. And he took her to dinner in San Diego and then to attend a Highlight game in Tijuana. So I guess that was Zeppo's standard first date, was dinner in San Diego and a Highlight game. And I saw him not long after, and he says, Steve, I want you to know I never even kissed a goodnight. She's very nice, but all she did was talk about herself. And then I saw her on campus, and she said, Zeppo was very nice, but all he did was talk about himself. And I thought, well, this is very interesting. And then at Groucho's, whenever Zeppo would be at a party, he would pull someone aside to introduce him to me, and he'd say, this is Steve. He's a nice fellow. He and I dated the same girl, but he got further with it than I did. So I have the distinction of having gone out with the same girl as Zeppo. So he and I were on much closer terms when I was working for his brother than he was in the garage that night. I mean, it was interesting how that shifted. And he really, people make fun of Zeppo because he was the straight man and didn't have a wild character like Harpo or Chico had. But he was never that comfortable being in the group. He had been pulled into the act when his brother Gummo got drafted in World War I, and they wanted to keep the four Marx Brothers as the name of the group. So Zeppo at 17 was brought in as the straight man. And he was never that comfortable being part of the team. And after Duck Soup in 1933, he left the act and became an agent and ended up being very successful, representing such obscure bit players as Clark Gable and Carol Lombard and Lana Turner and Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor. So he did really well. But he had a great sense of humor, and he really lit up a room when he walked in. He had a real charisma in his 70s. He seemed much younger and was just a character, So.
Right. I have, I'm curious about two things. One, when you were looking at those letters that people were sending because of the success of the film, what did you think when you were reading those letters, knowing that you had a hand in people, when you send those because of, what you did?
Well, there were other factors that went into the renaissance of the Marx Brothers in being embraced by the baby boomers. Because of their irreverence and thumbing their nose at authority, it fit right into the anti-war and don't trust anyone over 30 and that sort of thing. So that was underway before Crackers came out. And in fact, there's a 1969 Dick Cavett show where Groucho's the guest. And he's going to sing Lydia the Tattooed Lady. And he says, I'm going to sing a song now that I sang in a picture called At the Circus in a Pullman Car. And the audience goes crazy, cheering and whistling, and it dies down. And Groucho says, "Now, why are you applauding a Pullman car? They don't even make them anymore." But the point was, all he had to do was say that, and they knew what the movie was and what the song he was going to sing. So even in '69, the the post-war boomers had started the younger generation, which we were at the time. But I'll tell you what's more gratifying than when I was working for him is now I'll hear from younger fans who say, "I think the first movie I saw of Marx Brothers was Animal Crackers.
Oh, wow.
I saw it on TV, or I saw it at a revival house." And I just sort of chuckled to myself thinking, "You're welcome." Because I think about how it was the holy grail lost film when my Marx passion was at its zenith in high school and in college. And now, of course, you can pull a device out of your pocket and punch up a couple of things and watch it while you're having lunch. It's
right.
It's so easy now to see whatever you want, and YouTube's got virtually everything. So when I hear from people saying that's my favorite, or that's the first one I saw, and I think, then my work here is done. I have left it for the rest of you to enjoy long after I have shuffled off this mortal coil.
Cool. The other thing I was curious about is whenever you first moved there, you were excited to meet movie stars.
Yes.
When you were sitting at the table at Groucho's house, and all those different film stars were coming in and sharing stories, what were you thinking then? And what were some of the best stories that you remember from that?
Well, what was great was I was meeting these guys under comfortable circumstances. I wasn't interrupting them at a restaurant for an autograph or yelling at them, seeing on the street, "Hey, love your stuff," And they figured if I was inside, there must be a reason for me, whether I was Groucho's grandson or an employee. They didn't know. So there wasn't any kind of attitude thing.
Right.
And because of my passion for all those old things, I knew who all these people were, because they would come in and they would see me with my mutton chops and mustache and long hair and tennis shoes and figure he's just some hippie kid that's into rock and roll and pot. And, and it's like with Groucho's old writers, that their point of view would be, "You don't have any idea who any of us Alta cockers are, do you?" And it's like, "Yes, you're Nat Perrin. You co-wrote Monkey Business and Duck Soup, and you created the Addams Family. You're Irving Brecker. You wrote At the Circus and Go." And it was like, wow, this kid really knows his stuff. Right. So, for instance, when George Burns came over, this was before the Sunshine Boys, which was a whole renaissance of his career that led to Oh God and all those movies he made when he was an old man. But because of my fascination with these guys, I certainly knew who Burns and Allen were from their Paramount films and radio show and the TV show, The Burns and Allen Show. So I was excited about meeting him. So the day he came over, the doorbell rang and I answered it. And there was this little man. He looked up at me and smiled and said, "Hi, you want to live a long time? Become an actor. You'll live to be an old man like Groucho." "Okay, let's eat." And he shuffled into the dining room and immediately put me at ease. And It was fascinating because he and Groucho were talking about vaudeville. And, I remember B.F. Keith's Theater in Chicago, because that was when Harpo and Susan bought the Jelly Bean. And Groucho would say, "Well, "I wasn't in Chicago. I was in Milwaukee." And it was sort of like a preview of the Sunshine Boys, of these two old comedians arguing about whether it was on 37th Street or 38th Street 50 years earlier. And then afterwards, Burns I was very pleased that even though it was his trademark, Groucho had given up cigar smoking for his health because I never liked the aroma of cigars. But a number of Groucho's friends still smoked, so it was a frequent aroma in the house. But anyway, Burns took out a cigar and pushed it into the plastic holder, and he said, "I never smoke expensive cigars. All I care about is if it fits the holder." Now, Milton Berle, he pays $2 a piece for his cigars. If I paid that much, I'd go to bed with it before I'd smoke it. And I mentioned to him that I had recently seen International House, which was a 1933 Paramount film with W.C. Fields and Burns and Allen and Cab Calloway and a lot of other stars of the time. And he told me about a gag that he gave to Fields involving a coffee cup. And he said, if Fields liked it, he put it in the picture. I never knew that. And so the next time I was watching International House and Fields was doing some comedy with a coffee cup, I thought that was from George Burns because he told me that at lunch at Groucho. Right, so right. It was they appreciated the fact that I knew who they were. And I would sometimes have photos that I would ask them to sign afterwards. But again, it was super comfortable to be there, and it wasn't any kind of imposition. But mostly I soaked in what was being said, and then I would run into the next room and jot down funny things that Groucho had said, or that someone had said. And I ended up with this clump of scribbled isms, not thinking about the future, but just and put this in there, save them. And so because of that, a lot of those are in my book, Raised Eyebrows, which would otherwise have gone unrecorded. But it was proof, they were proof that Groucho still had much of his personality and sense of humor to making them. I remember some young reporter was interviewing Groucho. In 1975, he turned 85. There was a lot of attention paid to him because it was sort of one of those round numbers. So a lot of people who I don't think were worthy of it were assigned to come over and interview Groucho, really have a lot of preparation. And I remember one guy said, Mr. Marx, how has filmmaking changed since the days when you and your brothers were making films? And Groucho said, when we were making pictures, they didn't used to have toys near the set, but all that's changed now. And the guy said, oh, really? How? And Groucho said, people don't piss anymore. It's like, well, duh. What he meant was they now have, little restrooms that they can write up. But that was his answer to how things have changed. The reason it's changed is because people don't piss. That didn't make it into the guy's article, but I jotted it down in the next room for future reference. He could be a kind of short with interviewers, but for heaven's sakes, he was Groucho. He wasn't Warmo or Corgilo, and that was part of his person. So, what else can I tell you?
So let me ask you this: what was the biggest thing you learned during that time?
What?
What was the biggest thing you learned?
Oh my God. You're asking me to pick a snowflake out of a blizzard. Well, I'll tell you one of the things that stayed with me. Fourth birthday party. Jack Lemmon was there. Wonderful man, by the way. And he was talking with Harpo's son, Bill. And I was standing nearby and I heard Bill jerks and phonies in this town. But no, you are a genuine nice guy. And Lemon's. And at the time, I just thought it was a cordial response, but it really was kind of words of wisdom. There's no reason not to be a nice guy. A lot of the younger people in Hollywood had a lot of, I don't think you realize who I am attitudes, and could be short with fans and, autographs or that sort of thing. Lemon's philosophy was there's no reason not to be a nice guy.
Right.
And that stayed with me. I tend to trust, it's sort of like the glass half full or half empty. I tend to trust people until they betray me. Then there's other people who don't trust people until they earn their trust. And there's no right or wrong. It's just sort of how you approach it. But that was one of the things that stayed with me. Groucho also said, don't get married until you're 30, because you know what you're doing till you're 30. That was his advice to me. And in fact, I didn't get married until I was in my mid 30s. And so it was good advice. But
wow. So,
are you able to see me clearly? It's starting to break up a bit.
Yeah, it's kind of choppy. It's kind of like your audio is fine, but your video is kind of delayed.
Well, it's a severe neurological disorder I have. I call it buffering.
Right.
Mitch McConnell from. Anyway,
if you want, you could go out and then come back in and see if that might fix it.
Well, then won't you lose all your listeners?
No, they're because of the technology. My listeners they'll stay with us. They know how this technology works. Sometimes we have to play around with it a little bit to get things, to look really good.
So if I just leave the room and then click on the link again.
Yeah, and then come back.
All right, it's worth a shot. If not, it's been swell. All right. Now you have to hum the Girl from Ipanema or something while we do this, so that people don't
play some elevator music. So just bear with us, guys. I really want you guys to hear his story. So, and I want it to be clear, so he's not choppy. So we'll give him a chance to go out, come back in, and see if that maybe fixed the problem. Again, this is new technology. So we try to do the best we can with what we have available. So eventually this will get better. What we have is pretty good. So we give Steve a few minutes. Have him come back in. But his stories have been extremely interesting. Even though a lot of my audience may not know who some of these people are, the experience of actually getting to sit down and to be with somebody that you admire and watch, it's cool to hear some of those stories, of someone who's been able to do that, and some of the things that he's got to witness while he was there, and people he's gotten to meet, and it all helps to create a story, about it helps in your journey, and to be able to tell those stories. So I think it's pretty cool. It's cool. So let's see if we have any luck at him going back in. One of the things we could do what we'll do is we'll call Steve and see if we need to send him another link. So
Hi, it's taking its sweet time and saying and trying to slowly connect, and it's not connecting.
I wonder if it helps if I send you another link.
Oh, wait a second.
We in it?
It just went to the next thing for unmute and start camera. Let me try and enter the studio. Mic is working. Good for Mike. Here I am on the phone. I see myself.
Yep. There we go. Maybe we get it.
All right. Hello, Flash. This is Dr. Zarkov. You are backstage live 5211.
That's a wonderful technology. We have this new technology that allows us to be able to live stream, but every so often we have we have these issues, right? There we go.
Hey, it's great to be back with you, Parks. Hey, and how's recreation? I want to tell you.
Doing
All
great.
right. Well, we have the choice of either doing a herky-jerky interview or call it your call. I don't know why it's picking up where it left off with technical difficulties.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it's doing. But I'm gonna let you finish the last question.
And now I don't hear you.
Oh, you not hear me?
What?
Can you hear me?
Hey.
Hold on, let's do
All I
this.
heard was the last question, but I don't know what part of the last question was the last question you were either asking me or I was answering.
The
It's
last
come to
question
that.
that you are answering.
What?
We'll try to make this work. I'm going to call you. Okay.
Hello. I'm sorry, I can't come to the phone just now. I'm doing a podcast, and I didn't put enough kerosene in the back of my computer or probably fast.
So I'll let you finish by telling the one thing that you learned.
What happened to what Jack Lemmon
Yeah,
told me?
we'll do that. Finish. You can tell us what Jack Lemmon told you, and then we'll talk about the biggest lesson that you learned or the biggest takeaway from that time.
The big takeaway from that time. Well, in my case, I would never advise someone not to pursue their dream because sometimes they come true. I not only got the data out, which was difficult, but I wouldn't have traded it for anything. And then I actually did end up being a writer for television, writing episodes of Murder, She Wrote and Simon and the new KRP in Cincinnati, and being an author. And you just don't know. So people have asked for my advice about entertainment, and I generally tell them don't take anyone's advice, including that. Confuses them, so my work here is done. But there, because people have different paths, there is no right way to do it. But in my case, it did work out, and you should follow your heart, but don't starve to death.
Wow. Well, you could finish the story with the Jack Lemmon. What Jack Lemmon told you. Is it? You can also, if you want to finish the story about what Jack Lemmon told you.
We didn't get that before we broke up.
Freezing up while you were telling me that.
Well, you were asking about memorable takeaways, lessons learned. And one of them wasn't from Groucho, it was from Jack Lemmon, who I was always a great fan of, and again, never thought I'd meet. And he ended up writing one of the jacket blurbs for Raised Eyebrows, which was very flat. I stayed in touch with him over the years, even after the Groucho days, and it was kind of fun and gratifying. And he's just one of those guys like Harpo and Jack Benny that no one will ever say, let me tell you what a shit this guy was. He really was a great guy. So at Groucho's 84th birthday party in 1974, Jack Lemmon was there. And I got to hear him, after everyone had left, it was my roommate Daryl and me, and Lemmon at the piano playing jazz. And that was a really magical moment when it was just, and time it was, I got to get out of here. But he and Harpo's son Bill talking, and Harpo's son said, there are so many jerks and phonies in this business, but I have to tell you, you are a genuinely nice guy. And Lem said, well, thanks, but there's no reason not to be.
Well.
And at the time, I just thought it was a pleasant response. But as the years have gone by, and they have gone by, I realize what words of wisdom those were, that there's no reason not to be a nice guy. A lot of people in Hollywood have I don't think you realize who I am, attitudes and so on. But Lemmon did okay being a nice guy, I mean, he became a legend and won Oscars, and his work holds up, and he didn't have to be a jerk about it. So that stayed with me.
Cool. Well, yeah, I know that we've had some difficulties a little bit towards the end with the audio or the video, but I really enjoyed hearing your stories.
Well, good, considering we, spent almost an hour.
Right.
I've spent almost an hour unloading them on your eardrums. And I apologize on behalf of the technical world for whatever is or isn't wrong with StreamYard. And I don't know that Zoom would have been any better or worse. So I hope your folks stuck with it and didn't decide to pull the plug at the first sign of trouble.
My group, audience, they stick with us. So, even if we have a little bit of technical difficulties, I have a faithful audience, so that's one of the
Okay.
things I'm grateful for.
I should hope so. Yeah, we live in a technological time when it's too easy to just click delete or click one of the other things on the menu and go to some
Right.
other channel. So, yeah, good for you.
Well, cool. Well, thank you, Steve, so much for being on. It was a pleasure to get to know you
Sure.
and hear your stories.
My pleasure. I'll catch up with you later.
All right. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your morning.
And you as well.
Cool. Thank you. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. I know we had a little bit of some technical difficulties, but Steve is a great guy, and I hope you enjoyed his stories as much as I did. So tomorrow we have two new shows. We have Nicole, who's an actress and a model. She's going to be on, and then we have our friend Wolverine coming back. He was in Slap Fight Power Slap 5, trying to defend his title. So we're going to see how that went, and we're going to catch up with Wolverine. So until tomorrow, remember, you guys are uniquely designed with a purpose, and always keep moving forward. Peace.